My name is Michael. I'm 45 years old, and 5 years ago, I married a woman named Carol. When I said those vows, I believed I was stepping into a quiet kind of salvation, a second chance to build something stable, something that wouldn't collapse under the weight of loneliness. I was wrong, of course, but you don't see the cracks from the outside. They form slowly, between dinner conversations and unspoken looks, until one day the house you built with your own hands no longer feels like a home. Carol had a daughter, Emma. She was 15 when I met her, sharp, guarded, and impossibly loyal to the ghost of a man who only appeared when it suited him. Her father, Mark, lived in another city. He'd show up twice a year, birthdays and holidays, always with a new story, a new gift, a new lie. He played the role of the cool dad, who never said no, who took her out for ice cream and selfies, who vanished before the bills arrived. And I was the one who stayed behind, the one who picked up the pieces after he left. When I moved into their house in Dallas, I brought more than just my things. I brought hope, the naive belief that consistency could rewrite history. I thought that if I worked hard enough, if I fixed what was broken, if I kept showing up, they'd see me for who I was. Not a replacement, not a stranger, but a man trying to build something honest out of someone else's ruins. I repaired everything that was falling apart. The roof that leaked during storms, the cracked tiles in the kitchen, the water heater that rattled like an old man coughing. I replaced their aging car with a new one, signing a 3-year loan under my name. Emma called it hers before the ink even dried. I didn't correct her. I wanted to believe that small illusions could hold us together. Every morning, I left the house before dawn to beat the Dallas traffic. I'd come home to a kitchen filled with noise, the TV blaring, Emma laughing into her phone, Carol scrolling through work emails. I'd set my briefcase down, sometimes expecting a thank you or even a glance, but the house swallowed my presence whole. I existed in their periphery, visible only when something broke or needed paying for. Emma compared everything I did to her father. He was adventurous, spontaneous, fun. I was practical, predictable, steady. He knew how to live, she said once. Not just survive. I pretended not to hear it, but it stuck, like splinters in the heart. Carol never corrected her. She'd sit quietly during dinner while Emma's words sliced through me, pretending it was just teenage sarcasm. Sometimes she'd change the subject, other times she'd just stare at her plate, waiting for the tension to pass. It always did for them. For me, it lingered long after the dishes were washed. There's a kind of loneliness that comes from sleeping beside someone who's chosen silence over loyalty. It's worse than being alone, because you can't escape it. You breathe it in every night. Still, I tried. I believed that love could outlast contempt, that time could thaw even the coldest rejection. I told myself that family wasn't built on blood, it was built on stubbornness, on choosing to stay when you have every reason to leave. So I stayed. When Emma needed money for school trips, I stayed. When she asked for a new phone because everyone else had one, I stayed. When she cried after her first breakup and wanted to skip class, I drove her to the park and sat quietly beside her while she stared out the window, saying nothing. She didn't thank me. She didn't have to. I convinced myself that her silence meant acceptance. Didn't. Over the years, my name filled the paper trail of their comfort, tuition receipts, insurance renewals, loan statements, utility bills. Every line told the same story. Michael paid. Michael fixed it. Michael made it work. I started to notice the way Emma's friends looked at me when they visited. That faint smirk of recognition, the way teenagers can sense imbalance in a home. I wasn't dad. I was mom's husband, a man who paid for the Wi-Fi they used and the gas in the car they borrowed. Sometimes I'd hear them whisper when they thought I couldn't. Her stepdad's strict but rich. As if that summed me up, strict and rich. A walking credit card with opinions nobody cared about. The first cracks in the illusion appeared quietly. Small things, easy to overlook if you're desperate enough to believe everything's fine. Emma started locking her bedroom door whenever I came home, as though my presence were an intrusion. She began referring to the house as Mom's place, even though half the mortgage came from my salary. Carol noticed but said nothing. Maybe she thought ignoring it would make it fade. Maybe she was just tired of conflict. Then came the small betrayals, the ones that don't break you all at once but chip away at your foundation. Emma would post photos online. Her, Carol, and her father, smiling at a restaurant I had paid for. The caption always read, "Family dinner." My name never appeared, not even a mention. I told myself it didn't matter, that teenagers were cruel without meaning to be. But cruelty is never accidental. It's practiced, refined, tested until it finds the exact spot that hurts most. The nights grew quieter between Carol and me. We spoke less. She spent more time texting her daughter, coordinating schedules, smoothing over moods. I became the background noise in my own marriage, the hum of the refrigerator, the steady rhythm of bills paid on time. Sometimes, late at night, I'd stand in the garage, staring at the car I'd bought, the one Emma called hers. I'd run my hand along the hood, remembering how proud I'd been the day I brought it home. I'd imagined her face lighting up, maybe even a hug. Instead, she'd said, "Oh, it's nice. What kind of color is this?" As if she were commenting on something a stranger had lent her. That was the moment I began to understand. You can build a life on top of rejection, but you can't make it love you back. Still, I stayed, because stubbornness can masquerade as hope if you lie to yourself long enough. I told myself that one day, maybe after college, Emma would see it. She'd look back and realize who had carried her through the years her father only pretended to witness. She'd understand that love isn't about blood. It's about sacrifice. But every passing day made that dream feel further away. Carol began speaking about Emma's father again. Small, nostalgic details. How he used to make her laugh. How he had his flaws, but his heart was good. She never noticed how those words hollowed me out. Or maybe she did and said them anyway. I learned to keep quiet, to let the silence do the talking. Because arguing would only make me the villain in a story I had never written. By the 5th year, the house no longer felt like mine. My tools were in the garage, my clothes in the closet, my name on every bill. Yet I felt like a tenant waiting for eviction. I walked carefully, spoke softly, smiled when I needed to, and listened to the two of them talk about their family, as though I were a neighbor passing through. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering if this was what fatherhood meant for men like me, to give endlessly and be erased gracefully. To be the invisible scaffolding that keeps the structure standing, only to be dismantled when the paint dries. I had built my life on the belief that love could be earned through endurance. But endurance without acknowledgement turns into servitude. And though I didn't know it yet, that realization was already growing inside me like a storm. The truth is, I was never trying to replace Emma's father. I was trying to prove that constancy could matter more than charisma, that doing the right thing would eventually mean something. But in that house, in the shadow of their silence, even goodness became a kind of humiliation. Every time Emma compared me to him, I felt myself shrink. Every time Carol let it slide, I lost another piece of faith. And yet I kept telling myself, one more year, one more effort, one more chance for her to see me. That's the lie stepfathers tell themselves, that respect is only a matter of time. That love can be purchased in monthly installments. Can't. By the time I understood that, it was already too late. The damage was done. The illusion had hardened into reality. And all I could do was keep pretending that I hadn't already started to pull away, quietly, invisibly, from the family I had built not by blood, but by sheer, stubborn will. It happened on a Thursday night, one of those evenings that begins like any other, ordinary enough to fool you into thinking the storm isn't coming. The air was thick with the scent of overcooked pasta, the kind Carol always made when she was too tired to care. The three of us sat around the dining table, plates steaming, television humming softly from the living room. It should have been peaceful. But peace in that house was always a negotiation. Emma was talking about college. She was 17 now, full of plans, full of opinions, full of that cruel certainty that only the young possess. She wanted to study psychology, maybe journalism, maybe something that matters. She changed her mind every week. I listened, nodding, pretending to understand her shifting ambitions. I didn't want to argue. I'd already filled out the paperwork, opened a savings account, and quietly put money aside each month to cover tuition. She didn't know that. Carol didn't either. Some part of me wanted it to be a surprise, a gesture that would finally bridge the gap between us. But you can't buy respect. You can only rent it, and the lease always expires. That night, the conversation drifted like smoke. Harmless, meaningless, until it didn't. Emma mentioned her father. How he'd promised to help her move once she chose a school. How he'd probably get me a car. I almost smiled at the predictability of it. Promises were his currency. He spent them freely because he never had to pay. I said something small, almost careless. Let's not count on him too much. You know how he is with follow-through. Emma froze. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. Then she set it down, slow and deliberate, the way people do before they say something they can't take back. You know, she said quietly, you talk about him like you're better than him, but you're not. Carol looked up, startled. Emma! But Emma didn't stop. Her eyes stayed locked on mine. There was no anger there. Just that cold, adolescent certainty that she'd finally found the words to win. You're just a man Mom pity married. The sentence hung in the air like a dropped glass that never quite hit the floor. For a moment I didn't move. My fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate. The sound seemed to echo too long. Carol said nothing. She didn't even flinch. Her silence was worse than the insult. It was agreement disguised as avoidance. I stared at Emma, her face hard, unblinking. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even testing me. She meant every word. And I realized, with the kind of clarity that feels like pain, that whatever small chance I'd had to belong in that house had just died. Something inside me went quiet. Completely quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't peace, but the calm that comes after something inside you breaks beyond repair. I didn't shout. I didn't slam the table. I just stood up, pushed my chair back, and said, I see. 2 words. That was all. I left the room and went to my office, the one space in that house that still felt like mine. I sat there for a long time, staring at the framed photo of the 3 of us on the mantel. Carol had insisted on it 2 years earlier, a professional family portrait. The photographer had asked Emma to stand closer to me. She hadn't moved. The picture had always looked slightly off balance, though I hadn't understood why until now. I thought about the roof I'd fixed, the car I'd bought, the school I'd paid for, the years I'd spent being the silent provider for people who saw me as an intruder. I thought about every ignored thank you, every rolled eye, every dinner where my words landed like stones in water. And I thought about the man Emma called her real dad, the man who'd managed to preserve his sainthood by doing almost nothing. That night, something shifted in me. Not rage, not even grief, just the removal of illusion. The curtain finally fell, and I saw the stage for what it was. A performance I'd been financing for 5 years. Around midnight, I opened the drawer where I kept every document that proved how much of their lives I had funded. Loan statements, tuition estimates, car insurance receipts. My name was on all of them. I stared at those pages until the ink blurred. Then I made my decision. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't spite. It was math. Simple subtraction. I would start taking myself out of the equation. The next morning I woke up early, before either of them stirred. The house was still, washed in that pale gray light that makes everything look temporary. I made coffee, poured it into a travel mug, and gathered the car documents, title, registration, insurance, loan details. Every piece of paper that said, "This is yours," except it wasn't hers. Not legally. Not anymore. I drove to the dealership. The salesman recognized me, he even smiled. "Routine maintenance?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. By noon, the car was gone. Sold back at a fair price. The money, what was left after the loan balance, went straight into a new account. My account. Only my name on it. It wasn't triumph. It was closure. Driving back, I half expected to feel guilt. I didn't. I felt clarity, the kind that burns clean like air after a storm. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was simply ending a contract no one else had signed. When I walked through the door that afternoon, Carol was on the phone. She looked up, smiled faintly. then froze when she realized I wasn't carrying my car keys. "Where's the car?" she asked. "Gone," I said. She blinked. "What do you mean gone?" "Sold. It was under my name. I sold it." Her voice cracked. "Michael, that was Emma's." I cut her off gently. "No, it was mine. I just let her drive it. Big difference." Emma came down the stairs then, hair wet, wearing that smug look teenagers have when they believe the world is built for them. "What's going on?" I turned to her. "Your car's gone." She laughed, a short, mocking sound. "You're kidding." I didn't answer. I just handed her the paperwork. Her smile faltered. "You can't do that." "I already did," I said. "You said I was the man your mom pitied. Maybe this will help you understand what pity feels like." She stared at me, eyes wide, mouth open, searching for Carol to step in, to play referee. But Carol didn't say a word. Maybe she was in shock. Maybe she understood that silence had brought us here. The argument that followed barely reached me. Their words came sharp, full of disbelief and accusation. But I heard them as if from underwater. Carol's voice rising, Emma crying, the world collapsing into the noise it had always been. And through it all, I felt nothing. Just the steady realization that peace, real peace, only begins when you stop begging to be seen. That evening, I packed a bag. A small one. Just clothes, documents, a few photographs that still meant something. I left the rest behind, the furniture, the house, the memories. Let them keep the stage. I was done playing my part. Before I walked out, I looked around the kitchen one last time. The plates were still on the table from dinner, half-eaten pasta congealed in cold sauce. Emma's phone buzzed endlessly beside her glass. Carol stood by the sink, staring at me like a woman watching a bridge burn from both sides. "You're overreacting," she whispered. "She's just a kid." I shook my head. "No, Carol. She's your kid. That's the problem." I left before she could answer. Driving away, I didn't feel free. Not yet. Freedom is never immediate. Comes in layers, like peeling off old wallpaper and finding new rot underneath. But I knew the first layer was gone. The illusion that love could be earned through endurance. By the time I reached the city limits, the sun had started to rise. I pulled over, rolled down the window, and let the morning air fill the car. Somewhere back in that house, they were probably realizing what had happened, that the world didn't run on pity or guilt or assumption. It ran on ownership. And for the first time in years, I finally owned myself. You can forgive insults. You can ignore disrespect. But once someone tells you that your marriage was born of pity, that every effort, every sacrifice, every late-night repair was nothing but an act of desperation, there's no coming back. That sentence doesn't just wound you. It rewrites the history of everything you've done. It erases you, and that's exactly what she did. So I erased myself in return. When the news reached them, it was as if I had detonated something in the middle of that quiet suburban house. The walls that had held years of polite contempt finally echoed with panic. I'd been gone less than 24 hours when the first call came. Carol's voice sharp and frantic, the kind of tone she saved for emergencies. I didn't answer. 10 minutes later, another call. Then a text. "You've destroyed her dream." That word, destroyed, lingered in my mind like a curse. It wasn't Emma's dream I had destroyed. It was the illusion of ownership. The illusion that everything I gave was theirs by default. I didn't respond. I sat in my new apartment, a small, bare place on the outskirts of Austin, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sounds of the city through thin walls. The air smelled of fresh paint and quiet beginnings. I had no furniture except a couch and a desk, but the emptiness felt deliberate, almost cleansing. For the first time in years, I could hear my own breathing. I could hear silence that didn't judge me. The next day, Carol and Emma showed up. I heard the knock before I saw them through the peephole. Carol with her jaw clenched, Emma behind her, arms folded, eyes red but still defiant. When I opened the door, the first thing Carol said wasn't a greeting. "What the hell did you do?" I stepped aside. "Come in." She didn't move. "Where's the car, Michael?" "Sold," I said simply. Her voice cracked. You can't just... She needs that for school. She needed respect more, I interrupted. And I finally realized you can't buy it. Emma's voice broke and then, shrill and shaking. You're pathetic. You took something from me just because I told you the truth. You were a pity case. You think doing chores and paying bills makes you a dad? That's not love, that's control. Her words should have hurt. Maybe once they would have. But now they felt like echoes from a room I no longer lived in. I looked at her, calm and measured. Control is telling someone they're nothing while taking everything they give. I stopped giving. That's all. She laughed bitterly. You think this makes you powerful? No, I said. It makes me free. Carol's silence during this exchange was its own kind of betrayal. She had that look, guilt hiding behind outrage. I'd seen it before in smaller doses, when Emma snapped or mocked me and Carol pretended not to notice. But this time the stakes were real. Money had entered the picture, and morality bends quickly when comfort is threatened. You went too far, she said finally. She's just a kid. She was old enough to call me something worse than a stranger, I said. She was old enough to know what her words meant. Carol exhaled hard, as if trying to extinguish years of guilt in a single breath. So what now? You want us to grovel? Is that what you want? I shook my head. No, I just want you to live like I was never there. Pretend your lives were built on your own effort. You'll see how long the illusion lasts. Emma rolled her eyes and stormed past me, looking around my apartment with disgust. This is where you live now. Looks like a prison cell. Maybe, I said, but it's mine. She scoffed and walked out, slamming the door behind her. Carol lingered for a moment longer. Her voice softened, almost pleading. Michael, please, don't do this to her. You've always been the stable one. You've always done the right thing. That's the problem, I said. Doing the right thing only works when people recognize it. Otherwise, it's just servitude. Her eyes filled, not with tears, not yet, but with that look of realization that comes when someone finally sees the line they've crossed but can't go back. She left without another word. That night, I sat by the window, watching the city lights blink against the dark sky. I thought of all the years I had spent holding that house together, the weekends sacrificed, the late nights of quiet labor no one thanked me for. Every screw tightened, every bill paid, all invisible. And now, in this small, half-empty apartment, I finally existed again, even if only to myself. But peace doesn't arrive quietly. Comes with echoes. 3 days later, Carol called again. Her voice was brittle this time, stripped of anger. She's not eating, she said. She's miserable. She can't believe you did this. She should believe it, I said. I warned her with every silence I endured. She made a mistake, Carol said softly. You don't just abandon family. Family, I repeated almost to myself. That's a word you only remember when the bills stop coming. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, steady but trembling. You know she doesn't have anyone else. She has her father, I said. The man she thinks knows how to live. That silenced her. For a moment, I almost heard her breaking. The crack in her voice, the quiet sob she tried to swallow. Then she whispered, He's not answering her calls. I said nothing, because that was the truth I had known all along. The man who took credit for joy never showed up for the consequences. And now, with me gone, they were finally face to face with the ghost they had worshipped. After that call, the silence became heavier. No texts, no visits, no apologies. Just absence, cold, honest absence. And in that absence, something inside me began to heal. A week later, I heard from a mutual friend that Emma's car fund, the one I'd paid off, had been her safety net for college travel and part-time work. Without it, she'd had to cancel a class, find a job, face reality. I didn't smile at the news. I just nodded. The world was teaching her faster than I ever could. Still, late at night, when the city grew quiet, a strange ache crept in. Not regret, not exactly. More like the echo of a habit I'd unlearned. I'd spent so many years measuring my worth through what I gave that living. Without that role felt like an absence of identity. I had defined myself through service. Now, with no one left to serve, I was forced to confront who I was without them. And that was the hardest part, realizing that even resentment had been a kind of belonging. Then one afternoon, Carol showed up again. No warning this time, just the sound of her knock. Slow, hesitant. I opened the door to find her alone. Her face was tired, eyes swollen. "She's working nights now," she said. "She can't balance school and bills. She's falling apart." I stood there, waiting for the part where she'd blame me. It didn't come. Instead, she said something unexpected. "She misses you," she whispered. I looked at her carefully. Does she miss me, or the man who paid for her life? Carol hesitated. Maybe both. I let out a breath. That's honesty, at least. She stepped closer, searching my face. "You could fix this. You could talk to her. You could." "No," I said softly. "I already fixed everything once. And look how that turned out." Tears gathered in her eyes then. She nodded slowly, like someone finally accepting a verdict they'd spent years trying to appeal. "I thought time would make her love you," she said. "I thought she'd see it eventually." "Time doesn't fix what people refuse to see," I said. "It just exposes it." She turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. "You know she'll never forgive you." I smiled faintly. "Forgiveness requires guilt. I don't have any left." After she left, the apartment felt even quieter than before. I poured myself a drink, sat by the window, and watched the sun go down over the city. The sky was blood red, the kind of color that looks like both an ending and a warning. Somewhere in Dallas, Carol was comforting a daughter who had finally learned that words have weight, that cruelty costs something, that every real dad fantasy eventually meets the bill of reality. I wasn't proud. I wasn't vindicated. I was just done. In the weeks that followed, I started rebuilding, not just my finances but my sense of worth. I learned that silence can be merciful when it isn't empty, that sometimes the only way to teach others the value of your presence is to take it away completely. People called me cruel. Some even said I'd abandoned them. But abandonment implies obligation, and I had fulfilled mine long before they spat on it. I didn't destroy that family. I just stopped pretending it existed. And in the echo of that realization, in the hollow quiet of my new life, I began to understand something deeper. Love built on debt is not love at all. It's dependency wrapped in sentiment. And the moment you stop paying, it disappears. Freedom didn't feel like I expected. It didn't arrive with trumpets or peace or even pride. It came quietly, like an emptied room after the guests have gone home. The silence was complete, so complete that at first it frightened me. For years, I'd lived surrounded by noise. Emma's music bleeding through the walls, Carol's voice echoing down hallways, the constant hum of a life that wasn't truly mine. Now all that sound had collapsed into nothing. And in that nothing, I finally began to breathe. Each morning I woke before dawn, made coffee, and sat by the window of my new apartment. The view wasn't much, just the cracked asphalt of the parking lot and the orange glow of street lamps. But it was mine. No footsteps upstairs, no slammed doors, no whispered arguments. Just quiet, and the faint hum of traffic rolling toward the city I had abandoned. At first, the stillness felt like punishment. My hands kept searching for tasks. Bills to pay, repairs to make, someone to save. There was no one left to need me. That absence pressed against my chest like a weight. For years, my worth had been measured by service, what I could build, repair, or finance. Without those things, I felt almost transparent, like a man who had stepped out of his own reflection. But slowly, day by day, the silence began to change shape. Stopped sounding like loss. Started sounding like release. Carol called once a week in those first months. The conversations were brief, cautious, circling around what neither of us dared to name. She'd ask if I was eating, if work was steady, if I was lonely. Then, inevitably, she'd mention Emma, how classes were difficult, how the carpool wasn't working, how her father had stopped answering again. Every update was a quiet admission that the world I had built for them had started to collapse. I listened without comment. I didn't gloat. I didn't console. I simply let the silence stretch between us until she ran out of words. Then I'd say, "Take care," and hang up. Guilt tried to creep in during those early nights. Sometimes, lying awake in that small apartment, I'd hear echoes of her voice from the past. Emma at 13, laughing in the kitchen. Carol humming while folding laundry. They were ghosts, fragments of a life I had financed but never belonged to. They visited less often as time went on. Memory, like love, fades when you stop feeding it. By winter, the calls became rarer. Then one evening Carol appeared at my door. She looked smaller somehow, shoulders hunched beneath a worn coat. I invited her in. The air between us was polite, fragile. She sat at the edge of the couch, fingers knotted together. "She's working 2 jobs now," she said softly. "Your account paid for more than we realized." "I know," I replied. She looked around my apartment, at the bare walls, the absence of decoration. "You always kept things simple," she murmured. "I used to think it was dull. Now I think it was peace." Her words carried a tremor I hadn't heard before. I poured her a cup of coffee, black, the way she used to drink it when money was tight and cream was a luxury. She sipped it slowly, eyes fixed on the floor. "She misses you," she said finally, though she'd never admit it. I studied her face. The exhaustion, the quiet regret. "Missing someone isn't the same as respecting them," I said. Carol nodded. "I know. But I thought, maybe if you spoke to her." I stopped her with a raised hand. "You both taught me what speaking achieves. I've said everything I needed to say by leaving." She winced but didn't argue. After a moment she stood, pulling her coat tighter. "I didn't realize how much you held us together," she said. "Until you weren't there." I smiled faintly. Most structures don't realize what keeps them standing until the scaffolding is gone. When she left, I felt no satisfaction, just a kind of solemn understanding. Love without gratitude isn't love. It's dependency wearing a friendly face. Weeks later, Emma called. Not to apologize, she wasn't capable of that yet, but to ask a question. Her voice was quieter than I remembered, stripped of its edge. "Mom said you sold the car," she began. "Yes. Was it because of what I said?" "It was because of what you meant," I replied. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, shaky and uncertain. "I didn't think you'd actually leave. I didn't think you'd actually mean the words." She tried to fill the silence with excuses, half-formed regrets about teenage anger, about not understanding. I listened until her voice cracked, then said gently, "You don't owe me regret. You owe yourself awareness. Learn from what you broke." Then I hung up. I never heard her cry, but I imagined she did. Not out of sorrow, but realization, the same kind that had taken me years to earn. After that call, something in me settled. I stopped checking the time, stopped expecting the past to knock again. My days became rhythmic. Work, coffee, walks through the narrow streets near the river. The city carried on without knowing who I used to be. I liked that anonymity. In Dallas, I had been someone's husband, someone's provider, someone's fool. In Austin, I was just a man renting silence. Occasionally, I'd pass fathers with their daughters at cafes or markets. Men laughing, holding conversations that looked easy. I'd feel a flicker of envy, then pity. They didn't yet know what it cost to be taken for granted. They still believed love was an investment that guaranteed return. I wanted to warn them, but wisdom shared too early becomes bitterness. So I walked on. Spring came. I bought new furniture, simple things. A bookshelf, a small dining table, a plant I'd try not to k***lol. Each purchase felt symbolic, objects chosen only for myself. When I hung a single photograph on the wall, it wasn't of Carol or Emma. It was a picture of the lake near Austin at dawn, still water reflecting a pale horizon. I looked at it each morning before work, reminding myself that stillness can be its own reward. Then, one morning, a letter arrived. Handwritten, the kind people rarely send anymore. The return address was Dallas. I knew the handwriting before I opened it. Michael, it began. You were right about him. Dad never paid a cent. He said he would, but he didn't. I dropped a class last semester. I'm trying to fix things. I don't hate you. I just didn't understand. The rest was short, hesitant. No apology, no plea, just the outline of a girl growing up the hard way. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. I didn't reply. Some lessons shouldn't be interrupted. That night, I walked to the river and stood on the bridge, watching the city lights shimmer on the water. I thought about Emma's letter, about Carol's silence, about the years I'd spent trying to buy a place in a heart that was already occupied by a ghost. The wind off the water was cold, but clean. I realized that liberation isn't revenge. It's recognition. The moment you finally see that walking away isn't cruelty. It's honesty. I had spent half a decade begging for acknowledgement, confusing patience with virtue, endurance with love. But love, without reciprocity, is just servitude written in soft language. When I left that house, I didn't abandon them. I released them from obligation, from expectation, from the false belief that I could be replaced or pitted into usefulness. Now, when people ask if I miss them, I tell the truth. Sometimes. Not the people themselves, but the idea of being needed. It's a hard addiction to break. You spend years defining yourself through others, and when that identity dissolves, you have to learn to stand without the scaffolding of gratitude. But I'm learning. Slowly, stubbornly, just like before. Only this time, my stubbornness is for me. As I finish this confession, I find myself asking the same question that has haunted every night since I left. Was I wrong to cut them off, to let consequence replace kindness? Was I cruel to demand the respect I had earned with years of quiet labor? I don't know. Maybe mercy would have been easier. Maybe forgiveness would have made me nobler. But mercy in that house was always mistaken for weakness. And I had no weakness left to give. All I know is this. The day I stopped paying for their comfort, I started paying attention to my own life. And for the first time, every dollar, every hour, every breath belonged entirely to me. That, I think, is what freedom costs. So tell me, if you had been in my place, watching your efforts turned into pity and your love into debt, would you have stayed? Would you have kept paying? Or would you, like me, have chosen the quiet honesty of walking away? Because that's all liberation truly is, the moment you decide that silence is kinder than being needed only for what you give.